Hi, everyone. I want to come out with a video today to discuss various topics in the chase. And also, a couple people asked me to provide some more information. And a lot of this information I provided in the past, but it's over a whole bunch of videos. So I'm just going to throw it here. And I'm going to discuss some of the things that happened in 1943, Forrest Fenn's maps, and so on and so forth. But first, I want to get some of this wheel stuff out of the picture. And I'm going to do this relatively quickly. I'm not going to talk about it that much along the way because, like I said, this is all in prior videos. So, the Bighorn Medicine Wheel and Medicine Mountain, the mountain is sacred to all 81 Plains Indian tribes. Okay, the Native Americans view the Medicine Mountain as one of the major sacred sites in North America and have been viewing it as a dimensional window or a doorway into the spiritual worlds and afterlife where we go when we die or when we want to communicate with the spirits. The medicine wheel on Medicine Mountain is a symbol of all creation, of all races, of all people, birds, fish, animals, trees, and stones. According to tribal beliefs, the circular shape of the wheel represents the earth, the sun, the moon, the cycles of life, the seasons, and day and night. Movement around the perimeter of the medicine wheel is always walked in a clockwise direction with the rotation path of the earth. Native American ethnographic accounts refer to the medicine wheel as a sacred altar for the Medicine Mountain complex, illustrating the important central role that the wheel plays in ceremonial and spiritual functions. Some use the medicine wheel as a physical site, a representation of a Sundance Lodge, a turtle effigy, or a place to mark the summer solstice. When they go there on a vision quest, okay, this is taken from one of the signs that's there from an Indian. When we want wisdom, we go up to the mountain and we talk to the Creator. 4 days and 4 nights without food and water. Yes, you can talk to the Creator up on the mountain by yourself. You can say anything you want. You are alone with nobody there to listen to you. It is between you and the Creator spirits and nobody else. It's a great feeling to talk to the Creator. I know. I've done it way up on the mountain. The wind was blowing. It was dark. It was cold. I stood there and I talked to the Creator. That was written by a Lakota Sioux Indian. That sounds similar to what Forrest Fenn is talking about in The Thrill of the Chase, looking for Lewis and Clark, where they ate all of their food the first day. They couldn't find any food. They spent a couple of days. So basically, he's describing a vision quest, in my opinion. The history of our discovery of the wheel was as early as 1807. White fur traders learned of the Bighorn wheel from the Crow and Shoshone Indians. Although the wheel was built high above the Bighorn Basin, and the climb up from the basin takes effort, a wide and deep cut ancient traverse trail takes the traveler directly to the wheel. In 1887, the Tukatika, also known as the Sheep Eaters, elders, and medicine woman named Greta, said that her people chose to live high in the Bighorns to escape the flies and human conflict. In General P.H. Sheridan's expedition journals, dated September 20th, 1881, his expedition through the Bighorn Mountains mentions the wheel. The second document reference to the wheel occurred in 1895 when Paul Franke described his hunting exploits in an article and published it in the Forest and Stream Hunting and Fishing magazine that was established in 1873. Also, there's a wheel at the Denver Museum, and that was inspired by the Bighorn Medicine Wheel in Wyoming. The artist was a Cheyenne slash Arapaho, placed the Cheyenne words Na Kev Ho Esa Zim, which means we are always returning back home again. Note that, back home. They consider that their spiritual home. And I'll show you a picture of that right now. This is the picture of that wheel that they're talking about that's at the Denver Museum. And it was inspired by the wheel in Wyoming. And there's the saying that they just talked about right up here that talks about returning home. So the important dates for the wheel. Okay, in 1903, Stephen C. Sims of the Chicago Field Museum, upon examining the wheel, surmised that the Travis Trail road must have been well traveled for long periods in the past to acquire its deeply cut edges. In 1924, a man known as J. Ellis Ransom visited the wheel and he wrote about it. And I'm going to get to him in just a minute. The medicine wheel was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1970. In 1974, an astronomer and solar scientist named John Eadie visited and studied the wheel. He discovered connections from the wheel to the stars. He did not discover the connection to the decairn, but he discovered the solstice connections and the connections with Taurus, Orion, and Canis Minor. In 1979, a Florida amateur astronomer named Jack H. Robinson made calculations which showed that the southernly bright star Fomalhaut, the mouth of the constellation Pisces, Fish, Australius, south lying, not the zodiacal Pisces of astrology, by the way. It rose heliacally and could be sighted from the cairn F when you look across through the decairn. So he's the one that discovered the decairn in 1979 that's tied to Fomalhaut, sitting right below Aquarius. I've discussed this before. This also points right, if you go right beneath the decairn, that's where the basin is where warm water salt. Because that whole side of the sky where the Milky Way and Pisces and Aquarius and so on and so forth is known as the Celestial Sea. That's why all the celestial bodies are named after things that have something to do with water. In 1988, when officials from the U.S. Forest Service proposed changes designated to accommodate and encourage tourism at the landmark. Initially, the Forest Service proposed building a large parking lot, a viewing tower, and a modest visitor center, all within 100 meters of the wheel. The Indians then began to fight back. Okay, so this is around the same time Forrest Fenn got cancer. In 1990, the Medicine Wheel Coalition for Sacred Sites of North America was created with the assistance of the AAIA, Association of American Indian Affairs. At this time, the protected area was roughly 110 acres. And incidentally, this coalition was formed in Taos, New Mexico. So that's another hint to the wheel. You got Wheeler's Peak is near Taos, and that's I believe, the tallest peak in the Rockies that's within New Mexico. In any case, that's where this wheel coalition was formed. They did stuff all around the country: Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, of course, Wyoming, Devil's Tower, and all of that stuff. The medicine wheel in Wyoming was what they called, if you listen to my Francis Brown video, what he called, this was our last stand. They were not going to lose that wheel like they lost Devil's Tower. It's too sacred to them. So in 1992, here's J. Ellis Ransom again, author, poet, and anthropologist, published a book in his studies that linked the medicine wheel back to Aztec times. The book is titled Bighorn Medicine Wheel, The Birth and Death of Humanity, and its successor to the Aztec calendar stone. All of his medicine wheel research work is at the Cody Museum, McCracken Research Center, and it's part of the MS-011 Carl Hunter collection. Again, I'll discuss more about J. Ellis Ransom in a second. In 1996, an agreement known as the HBP was reached with the Forest Service as well as the state and local government agencies, designed to ensure that the entire area around the Medicine Wheel and Medicine Mountain is managed in a manner that protects the integrity of the site as it is sacred. The document established an area of consultation that encompasses all archaeological sites and Native American traditional use areas associated with the Bighorn Medicine Wheel. So they won in 1996. They beat the government, okay, and they prevented the land from being built on. Then in 1999, Wyoming Sawmills Incorporated, a local logging company, filed a lawsuit seeking to overturn the HBP, claiming it violated the First Amendment of the Constitution and several federal laws. The coalition and Forest Service ultimately prevailed, with the 10th Circuit Court Appeals ruling in 2004 dismissing the lawsuit, and a petition to the Supreme Court for review was ultimately denied. By the way, this all took place in Colorado at that same museum where I showed you. So once again, in 2011, the protected area was extended to 4,080 acres. It was also renamed from the Bighorn Medicine Wheel to the Medicine Wheel / Medicine Mountain National Historic Landmark. Okay. And while I'm down here, I want to mention too, the word solstice is derived from the Latin word sol, which means sun, and sistere, which means to stand still. Because at the solstices, the sun's declination appears to stand still or halt. The ceremonial sun dance is symbolic of death and renewal. The dancer is believed to be reborn mentally, spiritually, and physically. That is, again, in my sob, and I don't want to get into it, why the sun is your initial blaze. It's not the physical blaze that's on the ground, it's the one that leads you there. Okay. There's no way you're going to remove the sun. But when he says to try the wheel, that's the whole idea. You're using the wheel as if you were there on a vision quest and you're following the clues in the poem. Now that you know you're supposed to start at the wheel. And from that point, the cairns all indicate where you're going to go down into the basin, the Five Springs Basin, and then down into Five Springs Creek, and then down over Five Springs Waterfalls, and then through the Five Springs campsite, and you get the picture. I'm not going to go through all that stuff. This video will take too long. I just wanted to briefly go over some of this stuff here. Five Springs Falls Campground. Now, this ties into the picture video that I just did, where I was discussing the fact that there's clearly a coaxial cable next to the treasure chest in that picture that Forrest Fenn provided. So my belief is that Jack took the treasure chest out of its spot and then he brought it back to the campsite. Now we know that the campsite that he used didn't have RVs, and that Five Springs Campground fits perfectly because there's only one place for an RV, and that would be at campsite number one, or you'd have to go to the other area where there's other campsites. 99% of all the campsites there, including campsite number 9, which is the one where the sun crosses over, is camping allowed by tent only. So Five Springs Falls Campground provides an excellent opportunity for camping, hiking, picnicking, and sightseeing. The elevation ranges from 6,520 feet at the campground to 7,240 feet at the forest boundary. Like I said, this is BLM land, okay? But when you get to the waterfalls, if you were to go beyond that, which you can't, you'd have to climb up a cliff. You would then, once you cross over the waterfalls, be in the Bighorn National Forest. So we're outside the National Forest. So this would be considered the woods, basically. It's not a named forest. So this area offers breathtaking views of the northern Bighorn Basin with a panoramic view of the Bighorn, Pryor, Absaroka Mountains. Wildlife in the area include deer, elk, moose, black bear, and mountain lions. The lower loop of the campground contains 9 campsites with tent pads, fire rings, picnic tables, and a central toilet facility. And that's where campsite 9 is. Like I said, there is one spot, but there's no RV hookups at any of the spots, not even where you could possibly fit an RV in there at none of these campsites. The sites in the lower loop are suitable for tent camping and picnic only, with the exception of host site number 1, where parking a camp trailer is possible. A water faucet is adjacent to the host site, down by number 1, and is available for all visitors. A short hike from the trail to the picnic area leads to a lookout of Five Springs Falls. There are 2 benches located along the trail to the falls. I remember benches are another place where you would tarry scant near a marble gaze, which is the whole point of this trail. It's leading you to a view of the falls. The upper loop of the campground, that's where I'm talking. There's additional 10 campsites with tent pads, fire rings, and a central toilet facility. And incidentally, that's where the Broken Blaze is. It's over at the upper campsite. And it was probably destroyed by another searcher because they were in the wrong place. Anyway, travel up the access road to the campsites, which are located along the right side of the road and surrounding the upper parking area. Some of the campsites in the upper loops are designed as pull through, suitable for camp trailers. There are 2 benches located to the left of the access road, adjacent to the toilet facility, that provide an overlook of the surrounding mountain range. The upper loop of the campground also provides access to trails leading to the Bighorn National Forest. And of course, there's a kiosk in there, trail to the Five Springs Falls viewpoint. So that's a viewpoint, Marble Gaze. You're going to follow that trail. And I'm not going to go over that. That's all in the song. Five Springs Falls is a point 0.4, so it's less than a half a mile, moderately trafficked out and back trail near Level, Wyoming, that features a waterfall and is good for all skill levels. I don't know why I put Level, Wyoming. Right next to Campsite 9 is where the trail leads to the waterfalls. And from the parking lot, it's less than half a mile. And it's only a elevation change of like 150 feet over almost half a mile. So it's very, very easy, all skill. That's why they say it's good for all skill levels. Now, let's get into Jay Ransom. So J. Ellis Ransom goes over in his books that he talks about when we left the Ice Age 12,000 years ago. And if you look at the continents here, you see how big the continents are. That's because they didn't shrink, but the ocean water levels due to all the ice went down. So when people crossed over from Russia, okay, they were able to walk on land across here and get over to current day Alaska. They were stuck up there about 13,000 years ago because there was still ice all over here. The ice receded and they were able to come down along this way. And they were also able to come down along the water, although you can't really tell here because this picture eventually this ice was gone and you can walk along the coast. Okay. But primarily they came down this way. That's why you see all of the Clovis points and all the other stuff that they had found from ancient civilizations all down here, along with the mammoths, because they came down here, they came through Montana and then Wyoming and Colorado and so on down to New Mexico. At that time, you could still see the glaciers here. And I'll show you another picture of Yellowstone specifically. You weren't really able to travel through it 12,000 years ago. So J. Ellis Ransom believes that the Paleo Indians, when they came down here, they created the Bighorn medicine wheel. And he gets into all of that in his book. Here we are at Yellowstone Plateau, and you can see it's all covered under ice during the same time period over here. Right up at Clouds Peak, there's still a glacier alive. This is the Bighorn Mountains here. Today, there's still a small glacier there, and of course in the Wind River Mountains. But all of the glaciers here are pretty much gone. So this was completely under ice. Nobody would travel here. That's why they came down through the Bighorn Basin. So this is the front cover. You can buy this on Amazon. I picked it up. This is the book written by J. Ellis Ransom that I just discussed. That discusses where he believes that the origins of the wheel are. And he visited the place in 1928, just before he graduated from Washington University. He went through there and he came up with a lot of pictures that are inside that book. For example, this picture here, here's him standing over, looking down at the Five Springs Basin, all down in here. This is along the ancient trail that would come up to the wheel. And this is near the road. This road, like I said, you can only walk on it now. You can't drive any cars on it. But back in his day, they used to be able to drive cars up on here. And here is a prehistoric trail that he followed. And he mentions that he believes that this dotted line that comes from Rainbow Canyon and heads right up, same as the solstice. This crosses over to Ecairn. And he believes that the spirits of the dead would follow this line towards the sun, and then they would jump into the middle current. This dashed line is the old trail that used to go up and then cut across to the medicine wheel this way. This trail is pretty much gone now. There's no way, it's so eroded, there's no way that you can go up this trail. But here's where the Five Springs Campground is and the Five Springs Falls and stuff like that. You can see the sun would come down this way. And this is all from this guy. And like I said, the dotted trail, spiritual trail to the afterworld up Five Springs Canyon. Both trails originate at the mouth of the canyon. This is the mouth of the canyon up here when it says take it in the canyon down. Okay, so you're coming down. You can't walk down here, you'd fall over the waterfalls. That's why we end up going around and coming around the road this way. It's not far, but too far to walk. So this guy is pretty interesting. Did Forrest Fenn ever meet him? I'm going to hazard to say he probably did, because this guy was an anthropologist, but he was an amateur archaeologist. And I have no doubt that George Friesen probably met him. And so did Joe Medicine Man Crow, the oldest living Crow war chief. Okay. that there's a picture of Al Simpson and Forrest Fenn with him. Same thing with Francis Brown. I'm pretty sure that Forrest met him, especially considering that they formed this coalition down in New Mexico. So Forrest Fenn was well aware of all this. So here's J. Ellis Ransom. You can find this online if you search for his papers. This is not in the book. This is just all the papers that he published over the years, from the 20s, all 1920s, all the way on 1960s. So he was familiar with the wheel. He didn't come out with his book until after John Eady and the Robinson guy did their studies in the 70s, because basically he disagreed with them. And it's interesting stuff. If you look through a lot of this stuff, there's a lot of correlation to stuff that Forrest Fenn was interested in. I'm not going to go through it. So you can find this online if you want to look for it. So back here again, like I said, J. Ellis Ransom, he first visited the wheel in 1928. He graduated from the University of Washington in 1935. Ransom was married 3 times. His first wife was Barbara Elizabeth Collerman, with whom he had 2 children, J. Frederick and Alex Gay. Interesting. Gay Simpson. Anyway, his second wife, Frances Lake McKenna, and his final longest marriage was with Dutch-born Wilma Johanna Butler, with whom he had 3 children, Scott, Lisa, Johanna, and Stuart. And incidentally, while I'm up here, J. Ellis Ransom was born in Missoula, Montana on April 12th, 1914. I believe he died in 2007. I can't find anything about his death, but I know he published some papers in the early 2000s, so he was obviously still alive then. And I believe he either lived in Oregon or Washington when he died. And like I said, I believe it's 2007. Starting in the early 1970s, Ransom resided in the Dalles, Oregon. And I got an article, a link to an article here if you want to type it in. The new method was called the Elute Semaphore Signals, an enhanced obstructed verbal communication that Ermiloff and his partners were using. Oh, he discusses some form of verbal communication that they had before written language existed. But this guy is pretty cool. I'm surprised it's hard to find information about J. Ellis Ransom. I'm serious. You can look online and it's rare. You can't find anything about where he died. You'll find where he lived, and like I said, I found out a lot of stuff here. But he was kind of like Forrest Fenn in that he didn't have an archaeology. He didn't graduate college for archaeology, so people would look down on him, just like they would look down on Forrest, because he doesn't have the qualifications. He's not one of the elite, and so on. So he wrote a ton of books, this guy, and I listed some of them here. I'm not going to read all of these. He wrote a book in 55, 2 books, 62, 70, 75, 75, 80, 1981, 2 more, 1992, and another one in 1992. But I believe he also released some papers. Like I said, I believe he died in 2007. And while I'm here, I also want to discuss Al Simpson. Forrest Fenn quotes him as he's able to quote the entire book of Alice in Wonderland directly from memory. The reference to Alice in Wonderland, for all of you that don't know, is all references to pretty much the same places that are represented at the wheel. Okay, we got the fish footman. He's known as Pisces. The mock turtle is Taurus. The dog, Canis Major, Sirius. March hare, Lepus. Okay, the one where Canis Major is changing it. The old man on the fence is representing Orion. So through the looking glass and what Alice Fenn found there, Alice gets to Wonderland by passing through a mirror. Themes of reversal and inversion appear all throughout the book. And the other reference, of course, was Ernest Hemingway. Forrest Fenn took these 2 books, A Farewell to Arms and For Whom the Bell Tolls, and he flipped the plots on them. He got it wrong. I mean, A Farewell to Arms, but then he gives the plot to For Whom the Bell Tolls. For Whom the Bell Tolls was written in 1940, and it was finished while Hemingway was staying at the Red Lodge and also down in Cody in the late 1930s. But prior to that, the very first time Ernest Hemingway was ever in Wyoming, he stayed in the Bighorn Mountains at the Spiro Wigwam. And that's where he finished the book in 1929 called A Farewell to Arms. And if you look at the building that's there, and I showed this in one of my videos, go look at the Sparrow Wigwam online, and you'll see that the building is shaped like a clock, okay, like the hour hand of a clock. And if you go to the Bighorn Medicine Wheel and you look at where that arrow hand would be pointing, it would be pointing at warm water salt. It points directly to the decairn. And I just thought that was pretty interesting. Does it have anything to do with it? I don't know. So now I just want to quickly show a couple of pictures of other campgrounds that are at Five Springs Campground besides number 9, just to give you an idea of what it looks like and how the trails look and everything up there. There's another one. And again, look how this ground looks and think about how the picture is that Jack took. And at the older campsites, a lot of this wood is deteriorated. So imagine if there was a tent here, okay, and then he placed that chest behind that wood, okay, at his campsite, and that's where the coax cable goes. And there's probably, like I said, a cell signal booster or some other kind of thing. Okay, but there's all around the campsites. They're all surrounded like that, and most of this is pretty compacted. You could bring a wheelchair into any of these places if you wanted to. But I believe that Jack carried the treasure chest from the spot that he got it, and then he took a picture of it behind his tent secretively by a rock or a tree or somewhere along one of these things. Again, look at the ground here. It matches exactly the type of terrain that you see in that picture. There's another campsite. Same thing. Again, you can see that these are a little bit older here, the wood that goes around. I'm not going to show campsite 9 because that's in my video. There's another campsite. Yeah, like I said, they're all primitive. They have garbage cans. That's it. They don't have, no hookups or anything like that. Okay, there's another campsite, picnic table in it. There's another one. Okay, again, you can see the wood and you can see the ground, what's around here. You can see the creek in the background, the Five Springs Creek. And another one. This is another campsite. I don't know what the numbers are of all of these, but they're all there. These are all from the lower area where the creek is. There's another one. And another one. And you can see the creek going through here. This is right around where you park. The parking is like right over here. If you come out of the parking lot and hang a right, there's a bridge over here that takes you over the creek and takes you to a couple of the lower campsites over there. It's a beautiful place. I'll show you a video that somebody made. And I showed this video in the past, and I'll show it to you again. There's another campsite. Oh, this is all Five Springs. This is one of the benches that I was talking about when you're hiking up the trail to go into where the waterfalls are. There's a bench out here where you could sit down and you could actually get a good overlook of everything below you, the basin and the Absaroka Mountains in the background. And incidentally, this is just right past campsite number 9. Campsite number 9 would be down here. The sun would come down through this area right down. Here's a video of what it looks like inside the Five Springs camping area and along Five Springs Creek. That's the lower falls. The upper falls is way up here, the big one that you can't climb up. You can get up here, but it's a little bit hard. That's where we found that cross up there. Again, right around this rock is where that person fell to their death that we discovered. But the large falls is up there. This is all heading down to the campsite. There's that bridge that I was just talking to you about. Okay, so we're looking down from that bridge. This video is kind of out of order because now the guy is walking from the trail from the lower falls back down. There's the big rock slide on your left, the heavy loads. There's another set of heavy loads coming down by campsite number 9. And of course, here goes the Five Springs Creek again. It's a beautiful area. I mean, it's sitting beneath a canopy of stars up at the wheel, and here's your lush green forest, your canopy of trees. And if you look at that spiritual line that Ellis Ransom showed, like I said, That would lead you right up to your spirit, up to the place where you go when you die. Certainly a hell of a lot better than 9 Mile Hole, and it works with just a poem. Imagine that. Now you'll see he's about to come out of the forest, and that's where that bench will be on his left. And then if he continues a little bit farther down the path, campsite number 9 is on the left over here. There's like another mini waterfall over here, and then a rock slide, and then that's where campsite number 9 is. Right on the other side of this tree, there's a bench that somebody could rest if they wanted to wait here for somebody that was hiking back from the falls. This is the trail that leads to the falls up in there that he just came from. Like I said, that bridge is way down at the other end of this trail, so this video is kind of out of order. And that's pretty much it. Okay, I wanted to show you something else that I discovered. I went through and I found some historical documents that describe some of the naming here, and I came across a couple of weird things, so that I didn't quite understand. But apparently, historically, there was another campground. Okay, so Five Springs is down here. Okay, Five Springs is down here and here. Okay, but there was another one called the Hidden Basin Campground. And this was actually named by the military. All right. And it's right along the creek. And this is an older one. And there's also a spring there. And we have one of the water monitoring stations. It's actually still active today, where if you want to find the temperature of Five Springs Creek, you can do it right now. You know, all you got to do is know the ID number of the monitoring site, which is pretty easy to find. Okay, so that is interesting. The Hidden Basin Campground, and this is the same area again. And they were discussing. This is when that road was still open. You'll notice that you don't see the other road coming down here. This is the way it was up until the 1960s. Okay, so if you wanted to go to the wheel, you had to take that crazy road all the way around that is now closed, and then that's how you would get to the wheel. Okay. There used to be a campsite up here, and then we had Five Springs down here. Here's a PDF file where I found out about it. Um, all of the Wyoming Highway Project PSF 6590 Lovell Burgess Junction Road 14A. This is when they built that road and when they decommissioned the other road. Okay. They did some studies because they were going to determine which campgrounds they were going to keep. And they kept Five Springs. I believe they got rid of the Hidden Basin Campground. Now, if you look here in Google Earth, you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, this road down here that I have in yellow didn't exist yet. The only way to get up to the wheel was you had to use this old road that comes up around this way. All right, from here to here, this whole area is no cars allowed anymore. It's all closed. It's only a hiking trail. But if you look, there's Five Springs Campground, Hidden Basin Campground. It was called. This is an old campground. Okay, Hidden Basin Campground, and I believe they closed it. If you read the document, they found some artifacts around, and incidentally, this is within the protected area of the wheel. They found some artifacts around. They ended up closing that one to preserve it. Okay, but they still have over here Hidden Basin Picnic Grounds. Right? This is where the monitoring station is that monitors the temperature of the Five Springs water right after it enters the mouth of the canyon. And incidentally, here's the sun again, where Forrest Fenn is taking in the canyon down, the sun is going right into the canyon. So is the creek. Okay. And this is where I say Lewis and Clark. If you were to follow the creek, you can only go to this point. You can't go over the falls. You would fall 200 feet. You can't go there. The only way to come in, okay, is to come around the other way and come in from the bottom. There's no way to come in. I mean, obviously, you could take a helicopter or you could rappel down the wall, but that's not what Forrest Fenn intended people to do. And here's where the upper campground is that I was talking about. This is where they have some spots that are pull through that you could probably fit an RV in. All right. But they're mostly tent sites along the road. There's 10 of them there. Over here, they're all tent sites, right up to site number 9. So, and if you look over here, when you park here, this is where that bridge is that leads across. There's a bridge crossing the creek right here. There are no bridges up here. So that video was kind of backwards. But this green is the trail. And that bench is up around here somewhere. Or no, actually, it might be over here. It might be over here. The bench. I don't remember specifically. But this is where you would take it up to the lower waterfalls. And then, of course, you can go to the big falls if you go over them rocks that I just showed you in the video. And so, yeah, I hate Google because these lines, see how they're getting all distorted because of the geometry. That's why I use a topographical map. It works out better when you want to see things. But while we're in here, let me discuss a couple of other things that. So I'm done with the Five Spring stuff here that you all wanted to see. And again, where Forrest Fenn talks about the cattle, and they bring cattle here right now to this area. They're allowed to roam in here. And there's a building over here that probably it's a maintenance facility for the campgrounds. Okay, now I wanted to show you the maps again briefly. This is a 2016 rendition of the map that shipped in Too Far to Walk in 2013. And I'm not going to show you again, but here's the dot by Ralston. You notice that there's a dot there. Every other dot, like Cody, has a name. Gray Bull, Cody, so on and so forth. This is the only dot that doesn't have a name next to it. And that's actually in Ralston, Wyoming. And I'll show you that in a minute. But the other interesting thing that I pointed this out before, here's an earlier rendition of that same map. Notice that there's no dot up at Ralston. And after I brought this to Forrest Fenn's attention, they removed this map that I'm showing you here. I have a copy of it. I got it from Benchmark. But Benchmark, I mean, it wasn't on, you couldn't see it. If you go to the URL, okay, where they had the image, if you erase the file name of the JPEG, it dropped me into a directory where all these maps were. That's how I was able to find it. But that's gone now. Either the map might still be there, but the link is broken. You don't have access to that directory anymore. It only lasted a couple of weeks after I told Forrest, and they took it down. But why would Forrest Fenn alter it to put a dot there and go through the trouble to put a dot so that it's in the book, but he didn't put a name there unless it's a hint? So here's the map that actually shipped in Too Far to Walk. And like I said, you could still see there's a dot from Ralston here. And that's the only one that doesn't have a name next to it. And you can't say that they missed the town or whatever, because the town of Lovell is over here somewhere, but there's no dot there. And there's plenty of towns like that, if you look through this map, that are missing. So it's not like they labeled every town. They only labeled certain towns. But this is the only town that has a dot, but there's no label next to it. So why would Forrest Fenn have changed from the earlier revision to this one? I'm going to show you things that happened in 1943 that I believe might be relevant. In Jumpstarting the Learning Curve, chapter The Thrill of the Chase, Forrest Fenn discusses many things. And that's also where, if you read page 16, he talks about his awareness and when things first started happening. Well, that started happening where he mentions awareness in Jumpstarting the Learning Curve. And in there is also where he mentions Good Housekeeping magazine and Can Opener and the Andy and Amos show. Well, if you do a little bit of research, that issue in September, using the same date that's in the book, September of 1943, in that chapter where he talks about it. If you look in that year, the issue actually came out 2nd of September 1943. But more importantly, that same year, Good Housekeeping magazine's 1943 cookbook also came out, and it featured a special section for ration foods. Now, remember, this was wartime, right? So they were rationing foods. And as you know, ration foods, people were eating a lot of canned food, just like they did in the military, okay? In that same section of the book, companies were advertising can openers because it made sense to advertise can openers in a book and articles that were strictly related to making food from canned stuff. Okay. So in those books, the same books, Good Housekeeping did a review of something called the P38 can opener, which was also known as the John Wayne. Okay. Because it was pretty much indestructible. And it's what they used in the military. Okay. The cookbook featured rationed, like I said, canned foods because of the war. And we were currently doing war rations at that time. In 1943, the Good Housekeeping Institute, the same one that owns the magazine, created something called the Baby Center. And they created that in anticipation of the American servicemen coming home from World War II. And they also coined the phrase baby boomers. And I'm going to say it here and say it now. Yes, baby boomers is actually from 1943 to 1960. If you read online, especially in the wiki, and wikis are probably the most unreliable thing on the internet, they're factually incorrect. It's not from 1946 to 1963 because people started coming home from certain areas in 1943, and that's when the phrase was originally coined. Somewhere along the line, people changed it to 46 to 63, but that's not what it started at. So besides that, so it was an interesting issue. The other thing that happened is Heart Mountain Relocation Center in Wyoming. In the fall of 1943, the first marker was put down just 2 years prior to the relocation center being closed because the war ended in 1945, and that was when they shut down the Heart Mountain location, and they got rid of the prisoners of war that were in there. All right, that place is in Ralston. Now think about the map and the circle, right? Where FF had that's the only dot that he had on the map. But that was in Ralston, right? So the other thing that happened in 1943 on June 28th was a B-17 bomber crashed in the Bighorn Mountains. They call it Bomber Mountain. That's not actually the name of the mountain. That's just a coin somebody term, but the wreckage is still there. They didn't discover the men until 2 years later. And when they crashed, they were 150 miles off the course they thought they were on. Interesting stuff that happened in 1943. So you can see all that here in Google Earth. All right. Here's Cody. Here's Ralston over here. This is Ralston. And that's where the missing dot, the missing label is. There's just the dot there on the map. And that's the only place you will find that on that map. And here's Powell. Over here, there was a secret Air Force base. Forrest Fenn wouldn't tell me about it, but they used to use the basin for testing bomber runs. Matter of fact, that's the reason why this radar dome exists up on the top of Medicine Mountain. You can see it right here. That was used in the 60s before we turned it over to the FAA. And remember, Forrest Fenn was a radio tech. So Forrest Fenn wouldn't answer me about secret Air Force base. But here's Ralston, and here's the Heart Mountain, and these are the camps. You can see what they look like. The people put pictures here, okay, of the ruins that are there, and this is where they put the marker in 1943 of Heart Mountain. Now, this whole area, of course, is too low in altitude. If you look down here, you can see the elevation. It's only 4,650 feet. All right. But if you look at Heart Mountain is 7,800 feet. So certainly the treasure test could have been somewhere around Heart Mountain. That could be your blaze, whatever. I don't know. That's up for you guys to think. I just wanted to put this out there to show things that happened in 1943. and what might be related to the cano, put her in the military, and what was going on throughout this entire basin, all the way over to where the dome is over here. And while I'm on that subject, I just want to mention to you guys, because a lot of people email me about their solve. I want to mention again, nobody, including myself, can claim that my solution is right. I can only try to do the best that I can to only use the poem and provide evidence and show you something that I believe makes sense, right? So just like me, there's plenty of other people that have solves, and they all believe their own solve is right, and that's fine. But don't bother sending me your solve information, because at this point, the chase is over. I'm done. I'm not going to do any more research. I believe my solve is 100% correct. I'm never going to change that. The only way that that would change, if Forrest Fenn came back from the dead, or we found a video of Forrest Fenn giving out the clues, that's it. I am not going to believe a third party. Forrest Fenn's gone, and I'm content with my solve, just like everybody else is content with theirs. So I'm not going to do any research. What's the point? The chase is over. There's no reward for second place. So even if my solve is wrong, I'm not interested in finding another solve. Like I said, unless we come back with something for us. Somebody mentioned, well, what if the Fenn family came out and said, here's where the chest was? My answer to that is they better show me some solid proof, because if they came out and said something like, oh, it was that 9 Mile hole, my next step is going to be, I'm going to contact the government and find out why charges weren't filed. Honestly, I don't think it's ever going to happen. I don't think they're ever going to give out any solution. And certainly not 9 Mile hole. There's no way that that's going to work. But if Forrest Fenn came out himself and said, yes, it was a 9 Mile hole, then I would believe it. But like I said, my next question then becomes to the government, why wasn't Jack fined, and why wasn't Forrest Fenn fined? Why don't we know about this? This is our land. But I don't believe it's there, because, like I said, the Department of the Interior manages BLM land too, and all the other land that's all owned by the government. And I believe it's more likely that it's there. But the bottom line, and my point is that I'm not going to work on another solve. The chase is over. I don't believe that he hit a second chest. I do believe the LLC is up to no good, and they're going to come out with a Chase 2.0, and I want no part of it. You know, first of all, I don't trust anybody in the LLC. But I'll also go on to say that the reason why I was in the chase was because of Forrest Fenn. I like the challenge. I like the communication with him. I like the challenge of going up against him. It's not the same if it was Shiloh's quest or Zoe's quest. I'm not interested in that. It's over. It's time to move on. I'm interested to see what's going to happen at the end with the sale and all of that. And frankly, I think the sale is a big failure. We only got 3 more days left, and they didn't even hit $500,000. Now, obviously, on the final day, the bids are going to go up higher, but they're not going to double. So I believe that my initial estimate was between $700,000 and $800,000, and I still believe that's true. So basically, the auction is a big failure. Go figure. They didn't go to the media. For some reason, they believe that it's better to talk to other searchers or to go through something as ridiculous as Discord. Discord it began as a gamers platform. Serious people don't go to Discord. If the LLC was content on really making money, they should have went to the real media. Go to Lorraine Mills or somebody that's well known. Don't go to these clowns, such as the people that they went to. It's a joke. And even more funny is that they didn't. I really like the fact that Shiloh said that I guess he's not an influencer, and they didn't send an invite to the Fenn family. How stupid could you be? I mean, if anything, if they didn't turn it down, they would have helped promote this. But instead of that, so now you're going to walk away with 700 grand. And I believe that Jack, you know what he did? I believe Jack's part of the LLC. He sold the chest to the LLC for $1. And then this is his attempt at selling the chest. So basically, Jack's going to get some percentage of that 700 grand. And then the rest of it gets distributed to the clowns that help promote this. What a joke. Guys, Forrest Fenn told us that he paid $750,000 approximately. That is the value of the chest at the time he hit it. And that includes the treasure chest, all the gold, everything that was in there, roughly 750,000. So these clowns in the LLC are actually going to get less than Forrest Fenn spent on it back in 2010. What a joke. So I have no interest in the Chase 2.0, but I do believe that's the next scam that they're going to try to pull. And if any of you guys that were in this chase or have any kind of intelligence at all, I would recommend you stay as far as you can away from anybody that belongs to the LLC or anybody in the fan community that starts pushing a Chase 2.0. Move on. It's over. Take your saw, put a video out there just for historical reasons, what have you. So we'll find out all that stuff a couple weeks from now. I believe that Shiloh might come out and say something, and I'm interested in what that'll be. It's looking like something interesting might happen probably after Christmas or after New Year's, sometime early January. I'm curious what's going to happen. I mean, everything is ripe for something to happen. So we'll see. But like I said, I'm not going to be working on any more solves. I'm done. I believe I solved it. And I'm not really concerned if people believe me or they don't believe me. That's your problem. Come up with your own solve. That's all I can say. Come up with one that's better. But make sure that you only use the poem. Because if you're going to involve Forrest Fenn's backstory, his life, and you're going through microfiche and finding out all this stuff, you're doing everything except the poem. Good luck, because your solution's going to be wrong. It's got to work with just the poem. Forrest Fenn did not tell people to go out and research his life history. That is something that weak people do that are incapable of solving the poem. They're looking for shortcuts and backdoors. Like Forrest Fenn said, it ain't going to happen. And Forrest Fenn said, my favorite quote, "My shadow is cast by no fool." That is what he told Cynthia, Mike, and K Pro when they were trying to get hints out of him at that interview back in 2019. And I thought that was funny as hell. So anyway, you guys have a good rest of your week, and have a great holiday if I don't do another video. And I'll talk to you next time. Peace.